welcome to the third part of my 5-part series, 5 Smooth Stones, The Making of a King. And this is a leadership series, and it's going to help you become the leader that God has called you to be, and it's going to help you defeat some Goliaths that are going to try and stand in the way of your calling. So this week, we're going to pick up the smooth stone of courage, and it's about how David got onto the battlefield in the first place. So you're definitely powering along in this series if you're up to part 3. So I really hope you enjoy this part 3, and I look forward to bringing you part 4 and 5 in the next couple of weeks. So sandwiches. We're talking about sandwiches today. So what has cheese and pickle on rye have to do anything about leadership? Well, a lot more than you think. So David, why was he on the battlefield in the first place? If we look back in 1 Samuel 17, we'll see that Jesse, his dad, asked David to take provisions to his brothers on the battlefield. So basically, he had to take the packed lunch and go and check out how his brothers were going. And so Jesse knew what was happening with his sons and the Philistine army. And that was the whole reason that David was on the battlefield in the first place. He was just the sandwich boy. But after God anointed his head with oil, he had the 2 stones, which you have got in your backpack too now. So the stone of courage and the stone of fighting off the lion and the bear. And the next thing God prepares you is your 3rd stone, is to bring you into the attention of other leaders. He's going to position you. And that was the whole point of David going into, not to give the sandwiches to his brothers. God had a much better plan. It was actually to position David. And like I said before, it's not about the sandwiches. It's actually about positioning and picking up that smooth stone of courage. And when God needs you to be somewhere, he'll use anything to get you there, even sandwiches. But God needed people to notice David. He needed people to notice that he's going to be a warrior on the battlefield and not the shepherd boy. And God needed to position David in the line so he could go and fight Goliath. And now we enter David's eldest brother, Eliab, in the story. And he was obviously knew that David was anointed king. However, he still treated him like a shepherd's boy. And he overheard David, this is what it says in the story in the Bible, he overheard David asking the other soldiers what the reward was for actually killing Goliath. And it says in 1 Samuel 17:28 in the Voice translation, this is Eliab saying to David, "Why have you come down here? Who is watching your tiny flock in the wilderness?" See, he's already taunting him. Tiny flock? Probably not. Probably hundreds of sheep. It says, "I'm your brother, and I know you. You're arrogant, and your heart is evil. You've come to watch the battle as if it were just entertainment." So David, at this present moment, had the smooth stone of confidence and the smooth stone of fighting off the lion and the bear. So now he's got to pick up his 3rd smooth stone of courage. So what is he going to do now? So, like I said before, it's not about the sandwiches now. David stood there with his brother's packed lunch, and he'd actually watched and heard Goliath taunt the army of Israel. And to be honest, he'd just about had enough. So he fires straight back at his older brother. He says, this takes courage too. He says, "What have I done now? What have I done now? You're always having a go at me. You're always taunting me. You're always saying how small I am. What have I done now? I was just asking a question." Well, The one thing about leadership is sandwich boys don't ask questions to older brothers. Sandwich boys need to just keep their mouths shut and deliver the sandwiches and go home. Sometimes it can be the people closest to you, the elder brother. He didn't acknowledge the anointing on David's life, and sometimes the people closest to you cannot acknowledge it or cannot see it or refuse to see the leadership gifting that is on your life. So clearly David's older brother had watched his baby brother be anointed by the prophet Samuel, and he got told his brother was going to be the next king of Israel, but he, as far as he's concerned, is just going to treat him like the shepherd boy he always is going to be. And I don't think he's buying into any of this leadership anointing next king of Israel business. So what do you do in your own leadership when something like this happens, when someone doesn't acknowledge the anointing of leadership on your life? So verse 30 says that David ignored him. And sometimes that is really the best thing you can do when somebody doesn't acknowledge the call of leadership on your life. Because you know what? It's not your job to actually convince them that you're a leader. God knows you're a leader, you know you're a leader, and that's all that really matters. It doesn't matter what anybody else says. If God has said you're a leader, then you're a leader. Because you know what? It's not worth your time or your effort to actually explain to people that what you're doing on the battlefield and how God has stirred your heart to go and fight for his name. So these sort of people, they get rattled by your questions. See how David's older brother got rattled when David was saying, what's the reward for killing this Goliath? And his older brother would have gone, why are you asking? You're just a sandwich boy. Just get back to the tiny sheep, what he said, the tiny sheep in the wilderness, tiny flock of sheep in the wilderness. So they respond to your questions, thinking, are they going to try and fight Goliath? They respond with answers like, that's never going to happen. That is impossible, and you're never going to do it. You might as well forget it, because you're just a sandwich boy. Because they put limits on your leadership, because all they see is the shepherd boy who brought the sandwiches, and not the warrior that God says you truly are. And David knew. He knew Goliath was big, ugly, and he was a bully. And he was not happy that he was making fun of God. That's what stirred him. He was taunting his God, who he loved and who he's talked to in the wilderness. All the Psalms probably come from his wilderness times when he was a boy, looking after the sheep. And David was motivated. This is what motivated him into action, because he placed his trust in God and not himself, because he's got the 2 stones now. He's fought the lion and the bear, and he's got the confidence, and now he's going to pick up the courage. And I just want to give you a quote from Jonas C. Nada. It says, there's a difference between motivation and incentive. The former must come from within, while the latter comes from external elements. So, true leaders, they don't tolerate things just because that's how things always are. They find a better solution. And it's the motivation that comes from inside that propels you into your destiny, into changing things. And David's motive was to show this giant, show Goliath, that even though he was small, God was all-powerful and he was almighty, and he was going to go in his strength. And with the smooth stone of courage in his hand, it was that moment, and that it was not about the sandwiches, and it was the moment of the next step, of David becoming king and the making of a king. So I want to ask you a question. Where have you had to find the smooth stone of courage? And where have you had to stick up for yourself because people have been taunting God? And where has your enemy tried to intimidate you into submission? The older brother came and he started intimidating David, but David ignored him. When has a time been like that in your leadership? So I'd love for you to comment below and let me know. And then this is it for this week. So I hope you enjoyed my sandwich talk. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you're enjoying this series, and I pray that it will bless you. And when you start making sandwiches again, just think about David. Think it's not about the sandwiches. I am a leader. I am called by God, and I am anointed. And it doesn't matter what anybody else says. If God says you're a leader, then you're a leader. So next week, we're going to be talking about a thanks but no thanks. And I'm going to leave you with that thought. So you can tune in next week, and I will see you then. So take care. See ya.